One way or another, we will have world government. The question is whether it shall be by consent or by conquest.
So they have a really delicate balance to walk between keeping us relatively fearful, but not so fearful that we stop what we're doing and really examine how it is that they've been waging.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it, and that we will in fact find weapons or evidence of weapons programs that are conclusive.
I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
Well, first of all, I haven't lied. There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Talking about lies and your allegation that there was bulletproof evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. Was that a lie?
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised.
Are people going to find out the truth? And the truth will say that this intelligence is good intelligence, no doubt in my mind.
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
And we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
We cannot wait for the final proof. He's got him. He's got him. The smoking gun. He's got him. That could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Colin Powell didn't lie.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
Are people going to find out the truth?
I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I think that is...
No, it's absolutely not. What I said was, it's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service.
Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
He said there were three main reasons for going to war in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
The claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists would have attacked us on 9/11.
Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained.
And that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Nigeria.
The regime is seeking a nuclear bomb.
All three of those turned out to be false.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein.
Who does the president think he's effing kidding?
Of course, it was information that was mistaken.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
When you have a precedent set like that, and you have somebody, George Tenet, acknowledging in his book that he knew that the administration was deceiving the American people into a situation that is murdering young men and women from this country and others, that George Tenet and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and George Bush et al. Should be in fucking jail.
we're in the process of being turned into a police state. That's being implemented. And then just basically the loss of Canada, the end of Canada, with the integration of Canada into a North American Union of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And basically the end of our sovereignty, the end of Canada as we've known it, the end of the country that we've been.
In the United States today, things are a mess. That is, there's a huge amount of negative energy being generated externally against the U.S. and internally from within. Internationally, the country's not looked favorably upon because of the appearance of an imperialist agenda and several unpopular wars. Domestically, the U.S. pushes for more global trade, deeper economic integration and centralization, and reduction of liberties for the populace. Canada and Mexico have signed an agreement with the United States called the North American Security and Prosperity Agreement that puts both countries on the doorstep of joining with the United States into the creation of a North American Union, which would centralize and streamline the rules, laws, acts, and statutes for all three countries, abolishing their sovereignty. A North American Union to compete with the European Union. Never heard of it?
The Bush administration tonight is pushing, rather publicly now, its Security and Prosperity Partnership, a plan to, quote-unquote, integrate the economies of the United States, Mexico, and Canada by the year 2010. You're thinking, you didn't vote for that. Your congressman didn't vote for that. Your senator didn't vote for that. You're correct. It is a very ambitious plan for three very different economies and nations. It's moving forward without congressional oversight, in many cases congressional knowledge, and certainly not the approval of the American people, nor, for that matter, the Canadian people, nor the Mexican people.
After 9/11, the U.S., Canada, and Mexico began what they call the Security and Prosperity Partnership, aimed at beefing up security on the borders without halting commerce. But some conservatives see it as a grand conspiracy by President Bush and others to erase our borders with Mexico and Canada and surrender our sovereignty to something called the North American Union.
The Commerce Secretary denies an outright plan for a single currency or a European-style American Union. Instead, the goal is, quote, harmonizing hundreds of rules and regulations, but critics see stealthy changes taking place deep within government bureaucracies with input from business and academia, but away from lawmakers and voters.
All this is about is open borders. Open borders between Mexico and America, America and Canada. Open borders without any controls, and there's no telling what could happen to this country that would be detrimental to the future of America.
Numerous SPP documents reveal a goal of moving people and goods more easily among the three countries.
A special televised meeting of the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations. The speaker, Vice President Dick Cheney, takes a question from David Rockefeller.
Vice President, I just enjoyed so much your whole speech, but I was particularly pleased that you gave such a strong endorsement for the free trade agreement for all the Americans. Subject that has been of great concern to me for many years, and particularly recently, and I think it's absolutely essential for the strength of our economy.
Rockefeller's role in the drive for an FTAA was a lot more central than he portrays. Rockefeller cultivated Latin American leaders who could be counted on to support such a proposal. Both the 1994 Miami Summit and the FTAA proposal were conceived and nurtured by a Rockefeller-created network. Prominent among the organizations sponsoring the Miami event were the Council of the Americas, founder and honorary chairman, David Rockefeller. The Americas Society, chairman, David Rockefeller. The Forum of the Americas, founder, David Rockefeller. The Institute for International Economics, financial backer and board member, David Rockefeller. The Trilateral Commission, founder and honorary chairman, David Rockefeller. Rockefeller's influence also extends to the current administration. He was chairman emeritus of the CFR when Vice President Dick Cheney once served as a director, a relationship that Cheney concealed during his congressional career.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned,
been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
My name is Connie Fogel. I'm the leader of the Canadian Action Party. The intention in North America is to turn it into a power bloc for North America to compete with the European Union and then to compete with a third area, which would be primarily the Asian area. And then those, amongst the three of them, they'll compete to see who gets to be the big gun.
But if they don't want you to know of its existence, then it must be that they don't want you to have remedy for tyranny, and that must mean they're looking at acting tyrannical.
I have, yeah. It sounds like it's part of a globalist agenda to destroy national sovereignty and put a banking elite in power worldwide. That's what it looks like to me. I could be wrong. I haven't studied that closely enough to be sure. But I have studied 9/11 close enough to be sure.
The fact that all of these things are happening behind closed doors. I mean, why is there not some greater sense of what's going on the part of this government?
Congressman Jones points out that there's a website at the Commerce Department. He says he doesn't want a website. He wants to sit down and find out what this is all about. Trade, these things belong in the arena of Congress, and he'd like to see some oversight there.
Yeah, I have to say that what we're watching here and what you've reported and all of our colleagues have been reporting on with the so-called North American Union and in a few other quarters, the American people have every reason to be very concerned. The suggestion that these corporate and business elites, and now we can include some of the luminaries of geopolitics, George Shultz and others, meeting on these issues behind closed doors without the approval or the knowledge of the American public is ridiculous. I would really like to know, and I'm sure that you would as well, just what in the world the Bush administration thinks it's doing carrying out this kind of policy without the approval of the American people or the United States Congress. There is still that little thing called a Constitution.
Well, the government relies on that. They rely on their fear. The fear that they generate supports the deception because it makes it so that you aren't even going to look into it. The fear stops you from examining it, and it makes the deception work.
The North American Union idea gets hardly any media attention, yet it is one of the largest changes that would affect nearly 500 million people in some of the richest and largest countries in the world. Ask your local politician, and even they may be ignorant of it. However, if a senator or premier were to claim no knowledge of this agenda, they would be lying. These leaders are not ignorant, though they may pretend to be. The centralization and consolidation of power that would manifest from the creation of a North American Union and later on a Pan-Asian Union serves only to create more layers of control on a population whose freedoms appear to be drying up.
Well, there's a power struggle. There's an ultimate end goal of somebody in the world being the most powerful to control the world and be able to use the resources of the world for their greed, power, money. That's all what's out operating there. And right now, we have a European Union that's a joiner of a lot of countries in Europe. It's fairly powerful.
There is a fervent belief among some conservatives that President Bush is planning to dissolve the borders with Canada and Mexico as part of a secret effort to form what is called a North American Union.
I call it a stealth process. Well, I say the president is engineering, as it were, almost a coup d'etat, almost a change of government into a regional structure.
It is going to negate the sovereignty of the United States of America. And it certainly has grave concerns for our Constitution as well.
Those who subscribe to this idea use words like unconstitutional and even treason to describe what they see as an effort to create here something like the European Union with a single currency.
Whatever happened to thinking for yourself? You are a human being, and if you want to say you've evolved here or that God created you in 7 days, cool. Did he give you a brain? When did he say that you should write off your conscience and give up all decision-making ability and put your trust in somebody who was, what, chosen, appointed, got there because everyone else he was with got killed that day? I mean, come on. Let's think about how the chain of command works and who's at the top of it and what are the interests of these people.
The idea that the White House would respond, that this is on their website, This involves intricate workings amongst the Commerce Department of this country and Canada and Mexico's, of course, a regional prosperity and security program. This is absolute ignorance. And the fact that we reported this, we should point out, when it was signed. But as we watch this thing progress, these working groups are continuing, they're intensifying. What in the world are these people thinking about?
Well, they say, look, these are a declaration and an outline of our priorities. And when I called them today, Lou, they said I was the first phone call they had received literally since the deal was first signed. So people are not paying attention, and they're letting them, in fact, get away with this.
We're coming into a cyclical bottom for gold, and it rises going into December, January, so that might be the reverse of the dollar fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about, but I think it's going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. If you Google it, you'll find out all about it.
Well, you could tell us a little bit more right now.
You always hear that CNBC. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
You really think that would get any leeway?
You may want to visit a couple of websites and see how far along it is. The Canadians are pretty upset about it, whereas the Americans, apart from the Texans, are the only people who know anything about it. The rest of the public's really sort of with their head in the sand on this one.
All you have to do is look at the fact that CAFTA passed this year, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, and no one in America seems to know what that is. Well, let me tell you, America, it's the destruction of the country, okay? They're going to take away the borders in Canada, and they're going to take away the borders in Mexico, and we're going to have a North American superstate. And that's what they're after. They want NAFTA superhighways where nobody's checked, and they can get slave labor and be a part of that. I mean, they've already moved out most of our industry out of this country.
You know, I was asked the other day about whether or not I really thought the American people had the stomach to stand up and stop this nonsense, this direction from a group of elites in absolute contravention of our law, of our Constitution, every national value. And I hope, I pray that I'm right when I said yes. But this is beyond belief.
This is all by design. When those are the stakes, it's interesting to take a little trip through the last 100 years of history and look behind the curtain at the money men that put their time, energy, and planning into fulfilling this Orwellian future. But to really understand the how, you need to know a little bit about the who's, the whens, and the whys. To get the clearest picture, you need to do what any detective would do. Follow the money. Throughout history, people have bartered their skills or the results of their labor as property which could be bought and sold. Money is useful as an exchange medium, especially when two products or services don't have an equal value. Whether paper or precious metals, money is meant to make life easier when needing to sell or acquire goods. But who created money as we know it today? Who manages the money? Who created our monetary system? And what direction is it headed in?
In my opinion, history is just a play. It's a drama put on by the central bankers. They own the politicians. They own the media. They run the intelligence agencies. They run these secret societies like Freemasonry, which penetrates into every walk of life. And essentially, they stage every war since the Civil War and probably before that, the American Civil War. They staged the First World War. They brought Hitler to power and staged the Second World War.
The family thought to be the most responsible for the formulation of the modern central banking system of the last 300 years are the Rothschild family, the richest family in the world. Their fortune has never been audited, and their funding connections stretch out to many, many dozens of countries. It has been said that at one point they may have owned half the world's known wealth. Meyer Amschel Bauer was born in 1744 and changed his last name to Rothschild, which means Rothschild, or Red Shield, the family logo for their bank. He built his fortunes aiding Prince William of Hanau's rent-a-troop business, which had supplied Britain with many soldiers to fight against the rebelling American colonists. Having 5 sons and 5 daughters, Rothschild sent his 5 sons to establish House of Rothschild's merchant banks in 5 different countries. Son Amschel was placed in charge of the branch in Berlin. Son Salomon was sent over to the Vienna branch. Jacob went to Paris, France, and Karl opened up the Rothschild Bank in Naples. The headquarters of the House of Rothschild was, and is, in London, which was headed by Nathan Rothschild, the third of the 5 sons. In 1815's Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon was making his last stand against the British alliance headed by Lord Wellington. The Rothschild family financed an intelligence network of continent-wide couriers and messengers who were able to inform Nathan Rothschild, now the head of the British arm of the Rothschild banking enterprise, at least 20 hours before even the government knew that Napoleon had lost Waterloo to the Brits. Rothschild started dramatically dumping his stocks, which spread the false rumor that Napoleon had won the battle. People sold in droves, sending prices down to a fraction of their worth. Rothschild easily bought up the vast majority of companies before the end of the day, and with the truth revealed the next day of Napoleon's defeat, Rothschild's new holdings massively multiplied in value, making him unquestionably the richest man in Britain. Funding both sides of wars has turned out to be a major way of making massive profit, and so throughout the years, most, if not all, major wars have been funded by large banking houses like the Rothschilds, which control the central banks that issue currency and lend it to governments. The more the government borrows from the private central bankers, the more interest they have to pay back, and the higher the taxes are for their citizens. You can borrow money to make weapons, borrow money to transport and equip soldiers, borrow money to attack, borrow money to give to your friends to rebuild what you've destroyed, borrow money to make the public think that this is all in their best interest. And don't forget to skim huge amounts of kickbacks off the top along the way. Towards the end of the 1800s, and after the many wars in Europe, most of the countries were bankrupt and in permanent debt to the banksters. Only in the burgeoning United States, which was completely self-sufficient, was new wealth emerging, and the banksters sought to extract and exploit this in a new opportunity. They would take control of the power to print money away from the people and put it into their own greedy hands.
You know, they're told something from birth, and then that's all there is, and they don't want to think or question outside that.
It's always been about property or plunder, and it's easier to plunder than to work for property because you have to labor.
First, I mean, when you talk about conspiracy is a guy, another guy, or, you know, 2 people talking about something in some way that they're going to take advantage of these other people. That goes on. That's business. That's not even conspiracy. Business goes on all the time, right? If they do it at a profit and it falls within these rules, it's no longer conspiracy. You know, it's only conspiracy when what they do falls outside of those rules.
Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. However, take it away from them, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear. And they ought to disappear, for this would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits.
I know I could be wrong, but the most plausible explanation for me is that modern society is a fraud which spawns frauds like communism, feminism, Zionism, the war on terror, 9/11. I mean, our whole society is just rife with hoax and fraud because it's all based, they're all being promoted by the central bankers
who have to protect the central fraud, which is our government can't create cash. That's the fraud. Our government and we as citizens, we don't have control over our own collective credit, our national credit. We have to appeal to a private central banking cartel based in England to get them to lend us money, which they create out of nothing based on our ability to repay it.
I think what it is they seize power over you. It's about who is master over you and whether or not they get you to spend a large part of your life living in a manner that allows them benefit without having to do much work. Essentially, they have control over you. And it's about whether or not you want them to have control and whether or not you are going to grow spiritually in order to deny them that control.
The film Money as Debt takes an in-depth look to explain exactly how our money in modern society works. But a simple explanation is as follows. In almost every country in the world, the government no longer prints the majority, if any, of the money for citizens to use. That privilege has been usurped by the central banking cartels, who print the money out of thin air, loan it to the government at interest, but never print enough money to cover the interest, thus ensuring a perpetual debt that can never be repaid, but instead gets only deeper and larger. This is where we get our unending national debt. Many leaders in history have resisted the attempts by central bankers to remove the power of money printing from the people, including Presidents Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln.
In his era, he was the leading opponent of the privately owned central bank. Well, what happened to him was an assassin who was connected to international bankers, it was later found out, got right up to Jackson, stuck 2 pistols in his belly, fired both at the same time, both misfired. Jackson was saved.
President John Kennedy had planned to shut down the Federal Reserve and start issuing silver-backed U.S. notes, but sadly was assassinated as well.
The same thing went for John Kennedy, that he was planning to reintroduce the U.S. notes rather than Federal Reserve notes.
So they're getting interest, and I'm not sure if they're getting the principal, but they're certainly getting the interest for nothing, because they're creating this money out of nothing. And as the homeless man's dog thought, I can do this myself. You know, we can print our own currency.
Money used to be backed by precious metals such as gold, but since the Nixon administration, that standard no longer applies, and money is now worth only the paper it's printed on. The cause of many of the challenges we face in North America today were solidified in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve System of issuing money for the United States. The films The Money Masters and America, Freedom to Fascism, as well as G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, discuss in detail the history of how a small group of men, all banking leaders and politicians with banking interests, gathered in secret on J.P. Morgan's Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia in 1908 to plot the creation of the Federal Reserve System.
The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of money manipulators was probably the main cause of the revolution.
The reason that the War of Independence happened in the United States was because the colonies were printing their own money based upon their ability to perform work. So what happened was they were prospering because they were printing debt-free money of extreme value that the people used and wanted to use as currency, so they were prospering and growing. This scared England, and they banned it and said, no, you only can take money from us and borrow it at interest, putting them into debt. And that was the fundamental reason for their revolution.
After the Great Money Panic of 1907, which some say was precipitated and caused purposely by the banking interests, Senator Nelson Aldrich's Senate hearings recommended a central bank to manage the currency of the United States in order to prevent such a panic from happening again. Aldrich was, of course, intimately connected with the various banking houses of the time, including J.P. Morgan, Paul Warburg, who represented the Rothschilds, And, of course, the Rockefellers of Standard Oil and later Chase Manhattan Corporation, now J.P. Morgan Chase. Aldrich's bill was easily defeated because nobody wanted central bankers to have this monopoly on currency. Meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910, however, these men planned out what would become the Federal Reserve System.
I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive people of their prosperity until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered.
All this information's out here. People at the news say, but let me try to contact the newspaper and let them know about, whatever. So I'm sure people have done this over the past several years and come to the same conclusion. The problem is that we all haven't put our conclusions together and said, oh, we all realize this. And as soon as you need to do two things. You need to get the public to realize that they've been lied to. And you need to give them something constructive and meaningful to do out of that, right? You have to empower them and let them know that there is something you can do and you can make some sort of change, even if it's on a small personal $10 level or whatever. The idea is that we're not helpless. You found out, it may suck for a while, you come to terms with it, and figure out how to go forward from here, because this is what life's about.
This time, they helped fund Woodrow Wilson into power in 1913, under the promise that he would sign the Federal Reserve Act into law. The Federal Reserve Act was passed just prior to Christmas vacation, with the majority of politicians already home for the holidays. Thus, the bill was rammed through Congress and Senate with the skids greased, which is a term often used in legislative circles about laws passed with little or no oversight. Woodrow Wilson later realized his mistake.
I am the most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men.
The Federal Reserve, which isn't federal and has no reserves, is sold to the public as a stabilizer of the market. But that is in fact the opposite of the truth. In reality, their management of the U.S. currency is a giant scam, fluctuating the money supply with surges and retractions, while no longer reporting how much cash is actually out there. They cause inflation and deflation, recessions and depressions, and manipulation of the people into taking on a debt that is now in the trillions of dollars. In 1920, another manipulated money panic shut down many of the smaller independent banks, allowing the bankers an even further consolidation of their power. On October 24, 1929, the New York Stock Exchange experienced its massive crash that signaled the beginning of the Great Depression. In the time leading up to the crash, the banksters had quietly gotten out of the market and set themselves up cash-heavy. The Fed then contracted the nation's money supply, thus creating deflation which caused runs on the banks and brought the Great Depression into full swing. With the crisis shocking the nation into submission, the Fed then claimed the need to fight the Depression by forcing a gold seizure which passed as law. Roosevelt then put into action the New Deal, whereby the U.S. would now be permanently bankrupted to the bankers, but the people would get social programs to take care of them, preventing a depression. Some would argue this also created the concept of dependency on the state, which is one of the key points of the Communist Manifesto. This is the origin of our modern social security or social insurance systems. While seeming to have the benefits of lifting us out of the Great Depression, the obligation to fulfill that benefit lasts to this very day. Since the Federal Reserve directs interest rates and money supply, their influence allows control of the direction of the economy. They are independent from government oversight, are never allowed to be audited, set their own policy, and run the IRS to extract further wealth from the people in the form of income tax, which is discussed later in the film.
It is in the newspaper from time to time. People are losing their farms. People are losing their homes. because they're in debt to a bank. But what are they in debt for? There is no money. It doesn't exist. It's just a malicious game that's being played upon the people who live in this country. And if we wake up to it, the government should be in fear of the people, not us of them.
The Federal Reserve was created by Congress in 1913, and it was entrusted with the power granted originally to the Congress by the U.S. Constitution to coin money and regulate the value thereof.
This is about Bernanke. This is about Bernanke. He has to be on that call. Forget the investors. The investors are going to do it. If Bernanke needs to open the discount window. That's how bad things are out there. Alan Greenspan told everyone to take a teaser rate and then raise the rate 17 times. And Bernanke is being an academic. It is no time to be an academic. It is time to get on the Bear Stearns call. Listen, open the darn Fed window. He has no idea how bad it is out there. He has no idea. He has no idea.
Kramer.
I have talked to the heads of almost every single one of these firms in the last 72 hours, and he has no idea what it's like out there. None! And Bill Poole has no idea what it's like out there. My people have been in this game for 25 years, and they are losing their jobs, and these firms are going to go out of business, and he's nuts. They're nuts. They know nothing.
The Fed system is not good for the country or the world. They aren't even a government entity, but a private banking business with shareholders, which has been given agency status and legal authority by the United States. And even that fact of their legality is debatable. In summation, the Federal Reserve System is a giant fleecing of the American people, and all people. By manipulating the money supply, causing inflation and deflation and perpetual debt, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, who help control the Fed, now use the same problem reaction solution scheme that created the Fed in many third world countries. In order to exploit the people of these countries, banking interests support revolutions against the people and set up tin pot dictators, loaning them heaps of money at exorbitant interest, and then confiscating land and resources of the country when the dictator inevitably defaults on the loan.
Now it just says, and everybody can look at their bills today, and it says this note is legal tender. Well, it just means that it's recognized by the government and that it's accepted for taxes, so that's why we believe it has value, but it's only our faith in it.
As currency has moved away from being backed by precious metals to being backed by only nothing but faith, electronic currencies become popular, not only as a way to keep the game running much further than it was originally designed, but as a means of tracking the flow of money, in order to exercise even greater control over all financial transactions.
Let's just look at it. First of all, the Federal Reserve is anything but federal. It's a privately owned organization. Okay, and if you think that your money's safe in the bank, let me tell you how it works. Let's say you have $100 in the bank, all right? We know you got more, but for this purpose, we'll say 100. Now, the bank only has to keep 10% of that. In other words, all the money that's in that bank, they have to have 10% on standby all the time. So they only really have to have 10 of your $100. So then the money they get comes from the Federal Reserve banking system. And the Federal Reserve banking system needs to have less than 10% of that. So your $100 is literally worth less than $1 in hard currency. And in this country, we used to have a hard currency based on the gold. But what happened was they started to sell it off. People realized, hey, we can't sell off the gold or the money's not going to be worth anything. So what did? They started selling it off secretly afterwards. And actually, in World Trade Center Building 7, there was a lot of investigative documents pertaining to the sale of the gold from the Federal Reserve, and that case has been washed away now because there's no more evidence there.
Kramer.
I have not seen it like this since I went 5 bid for 500,000 shares of Citigroup when I got hit in 1990. This is a different kind of market, and the Fed is asleep.
Okay, but here's the thing.
Well, Bill Poole is a shame. He's shameful.
Hold on. I know
he
you're
let her go and read the accredited home document. At least I read the darn thing.
Hold on. I know you're passionate, and I hear you, but at the same time, a lot of people are saying this is, yes, there's certain types of mortgages that aren't available. There are all sorts of issues.
Loan if you're rich like me.
But Kramer, if you did what you said, which seems to me from the way you just explained yourself.
Cut the rate. Open the discount window.
Okay,
cut the rate.
If you come out next week and cuts rate,
Who's the pressure?
you're going to have, that's going to cause Armageddon.
No, we have Armageddon. I wouldn't try to cause it. We have Armageddon. In the fixed income markets, we have Armageddon.
No, but that's not what
we
they
have
say.
Armageddon.
They say, even when I talk to a couple banks, they don't say it's Armageddon.
Well,
they say it's repricing. They're very firm about that.
Oh, great. Okay, well, let them be calm and then have them call me on the way home like they do every night and tell me, Kramer, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to help us? Are you going to help us? Are you going to stand on the sideline like everybody else and say that it's fine? Will somebody come on TV and tell the truth about how bad it is?
A lot of people say, these same people say, it's not Ben Bernanke and the rate that matters. The bond market now is completely separate from
It's entirely
the bond market is trading separately from the rate.
Look, we'll spend billions in Iraq to build homes. We are going to have thousands of people. We have thousands of people losing their homes right now. 14 million people took a mortgage in the last 3 years. 7 million of them took teaser rates or took piggyback rates. They will lose their homes. This is crazy.
Yes.
I'm sorry to be upset about it, but you have to understand what they're saying to me off the record before I come in here every night and every day. And what I hear from these blowhard managers who act like it's call someone, for heaven's sake. Go call someone. I worked at fixed income at Goldman Sachs. This is not the time to be complacent. Unfortunately, I know too many people and I'm too darn old.
The banksters seek to further centralize, consolidate, and own as much as they can on this planet. And they will not stop seeking new ways to guide and control us, corralling us into narrower fields of choice, dumbing us down, and attempting to remove our humanity from us. Literally.
Give me the power to issue a nation's currency, and I care not who writes its laws.
Money as paper is a problem because it has no intrinsic value, only the faith of the people and the credit of that country. Today's money is called legal tender, which is a paper fiat currency. Fiat meaning no thing or worthless. When a sheet of $100 bills is printed, the sheet of paper might cost a few cents. With the government printing paper money, they can just issue it interest-free. And as long as it doesn't print too much, or keeps its value pegged to its gold reserves, then the currency can maintain a perceived value with the people. Central banks, however, loan a sheet of 50 bills with the number 100 on them to the U.S. for $5,000 plus interest, and 50 bills with the number 20 on them for $1,000 plus interest. The cost of a sheet is about 40 cents. Do you see a problem with this scenario?
Every $100 bill which the Federal Reserve System prints and is sold to the United States at full face value represents a $100 loan. Even though the government pays for it, they still pay interest.
Whoever's making the money, like actually printing the money, they're the guys that have the control. And it looks like to me like that's a centralized group of people, and all the evidence point to that.
It's the fundamental thing that our country really can't become a great country without conflict until it gets control of printing its own money.
The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of the government, but is the government's greatest creative opportunity. By the adoption of these principles, the long-felt want for a uniform medium will be satisfied. The taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest, discounts, and exchanges. The financing of all public enterprises, the maintenance of stable government and ordered progress, and the conduct of the Treasury will become matters of practical administration. The people can and will be furnished with a currency as safe as their own government. Money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity. Democracy will rise superior to the money power.
Fundamentally, we need to say, hey, listen, if you're going to be our government, you're not borrowing money to exist. You're going to print your own money at cost, and you're going to give it to us at what, 3% interest? That should be it, or none. We just have to pay back what we owe.
I'll be okay with like 10% of it. I mean, obviously we need centralized, at least in Canada, we need a centralized service for certain things. You know, the post office, that's fine. I don't mind the post office, and I think that, you know, the government should be making money.
government should be making money.
The backing for our financial system in this country, the backing for our money is our resources, human and natural. It's people, and it's what's under the ground, it's the water, it's the air, it's everything. And people have to understand that their resource, themselves as human beings, as resources, educated, healthy people, that's a measure, that's a resource that's actually never quantified in our, when the government works out the value of what our country is worth. Those aspects of the, as a resource are extremely valuable. You never have, we should be quantifying it, and we have to realize we never pay that back. Money we put out for education, money we put out for health, we don't have to worry about getting it paid back because it returns to us by the contribution that the human being makes as a result of being educated and healthy. Those are very important concepts.
The problem is, in order to prevent us from printing our own currency, the central bankers, who basically can print money at will, have bought everybody and bought everything. They've bought the universities, they've bought the media, they've bought the corporations. So our whole society is run by these foreign private bankers who are trying to protect their golden goose, trying to prevent us from realizing that we're paying them money for nothing, for something we could be doing for ourselves.
Well, with major lenders, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, on apparently shaky ground, the top government officials charged with protecting the economy are discussing their options. But as you might suspect, they haven't come up with anything close to a solution for the problems facing homeowners. And this administration continues to insist that lenders are not in a crisis. Kitty Pilgrim has the report.
President Bush, flanked by Secretary Paulson and Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, tried to calm fears about financial stability of the country's two largest mortgage finance companies, which own or guarantee about half of U.S. mortgages.
Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are very important institutions. We spent a fair amount of time discussing these institutions. He assured me that he and Ben Bernanke will be working this issue very hard.
The mortgage default rate has risen so high, Wall Street investors are in turmoil over what may come next. Even Secretary Paulson admitting this week many of today's unusually high number of foreclosures are not preventable, putting the estimated number for this year at 2.5 million. Banking analysts estimate it's higher, running some 8,000 a day. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill have been locked in a partisan stalemate for months over foreclosure relief legislation. But at best, the Congressional Budget Office estimates those measures would help only 500,000 homeowners. Some economists say the mortgage crisis isn't over.
We have a housing bubble that's burst, maybe 60% of it has burst, but that still leaves a long way to go, and that's got to hit consumer spending a lot more.
But Senator Chris Dodd, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, saying today the two largest mortgage lenders were fundamentally sound and strong.
There is a sort of a panic going on today, and that's not what ought to be. The facts don't warrant that reaction, in my view.
Senator Dodd said Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are adequately capitalized and mostly held 30-year fixed mortgages and not risky subprime lending. Now, mortgage rescue legislation passed late this evening in the Senate by 63-5. Still faces a big battle. The House has to make changes in the legislation next week. Now, Congress promised to pass this measure before the August recess. That holds pretty little comfort because they also promised to pass it before July 4th. Lou.
Well, in this situation, let's go with the good news, for crying out loud. At least the Senate did pass it finally. I can't imagine the House failing to at least provide some help. The question is, to what degree that help will arrive in time for literally now millions of homeowners facing foreclosure.
There has been a large yet subtle transition from what we believe our country stands for, how they're governed and ruled, and how the rights of the citizens are respected, to what is in reality an invisible oligarchy, in place due to the illusions we have been duped into believing, marketing to us every day about how great things are, how great the system works, and how there's no need to change anything major. For the creators of this system, it means our perpetual ignorance and their perpetual profit and control. Even our law system, the traditional mechanism of solving disputes, has been usurped and replaced from what it used to be, with nary so much as a whimper or complaint. The people and families who have dominated the major industries of finance, steel, oil, and other darker pursuits, like drugs and slavery, seek to gain control over all humanity through their cartel capitalism ideology, wherein corporate interests, beholden to a central currency influence, control all political process, the creation of acts and statutes, and enforcement against the people. The financing and planning of these centralized continental unions, like the European Union, North American Union, African and Pan-Asian unions, and the single currencies planned for each, are just steps forward in a centuries-old plan to bring about a world government. These interests have had total control of our currency system for almost 100 years and are essentially using our energy and our labor to not only profit for themselves, but to further fund and contribute to their plans and our further enslavement. It's important to gain a succinct analysis of the multi-tendrilled beast our system has become, as well as the various facets of control used by these elite families, including the military and drug wars. It is also imperative to note how the money system has taken root in the last 100 years and delve with great detail into the motivations and structures of financial leveraging that have been used to build up this illusory glass prison of credit and debt around humanity. Until we break out of our trapped understanding of how money works and how it is actually created, we will be slaves to the bankers, even with an invisible yoke. The solutions will come from our understanding and the positive choices we make when voting with our dollars. Plus, understanding how the creation of money is used in today's society to trick us into giving up more energy than we receive in exchange. To further your understanding of how money works and learn about the history of money, visit thecauseofeffect.com for further information and connect yourself to solutions. You can find solutions in your awareness, and by providing awareness to others about how currency and monetary scams are used by central banks, and also by researching the subjects of money creation, currency printing, national debts, central banks, tax-exempt foundations, the Federal Reserve System, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank.